Well, just a few days ago, Call of Duty Esports was hit with a bombshell as 100 Thieves announced that they will not be competing nor having a roster for the inaugural year of the Call of Duty League. Speaking first as a Call of Duty Esports fan, this one hurts. This hurts very, very bad, losing one of the biggest brands, not just in Call of Duty, but in esports today. Losing the cool kid on the block, not just in Call of Duty, but in all of esports. Now, for those that missed the 100 Thieves release, the video that Nate Schott put out, I thought was very well put together. He covered the reasons as to why they will not be involved next year, displaying that they are a young organization and paying a $25 million price could heavily hurt the company, especially at the stage that they are in. And the idea of rebranding is by no means something that they are a fan to look to do, especially at this point. Kind of one of the lines, like I said, of explaining that they are a company based heavily on their brand, and that's kind of what we've known 100 Thieves to be about. I mean, we look at them, they are an esports team, but very similar to the infancy of Optic, it was about content first. It was really kind of a matter of outside things first, and esports somewhat in second place. But like I said, their identity to them is incredibly important, and like for them, it makes a lot of sense to not want to try and support a totally new name when they're in the process of just trying to make sure they have one in the first place. And everything that Nade brought up in that video, for me at least, as I was watching it, made perfect sense. Everything he discussed, all the points that he emphasized, I felt were valid and somewhat understanding. A reaction I'm sure that many Call of Duty Esports had as well when they started to learn the news. And now this leaves us with this. Questions in our mind, thinking about saying, hey, we just lost one of the biggest brands in Call of Duty Esports. Now where does that leave us? Is franchising, one of the many questions, is franchising already beginning to burden Call of Duty Esports before it even starts? Is it already doing more harm than good? Is it worth turning away teams like 100 Thieves as other organizations as well could follow along their path? And I think at this point, those are very valid questions, right? Those are arguments that are absolutely up for debate, but they cannot be answered yet because we've yet to see how franchise works. I mean, to say that a $25 million prize pool, or not prize pool, but a price in general is somewhat high, I get that. But in terms of explaining and saying, hey, was it worth it? Is it burdening the esport? There's no way that we can assume what will take place, and there's no way to answer a few of these questions that people are already trying to throw out there. However, to say it is worrying, yes, it is. It is very, very worrying. As a Call of Duty esports fan, you should be worried about the news of a major esports brand, one of the biggest in the world and in Call of Duty esports itself, saying farewell. Not because of the game, but behind the stipulations on how they can get in. Based on the CWL this year, the second most viewed team in the Pro League and in the entire CWL, behind Optic and right above FaZe Clan, is gone for next year. And to include both Optic and FaZe in that conversation, we could be losing, right, and it seems to be that way, that Optic will no longer be under the same name. The boys of Green are pretty much leaving and heading somewhere else. We're losing 100 Thieves, and we also could potentially be losing FaZe Clan, which are the three, based off viewership, biggest brands in Call of Duty. And this gives some cause for concern. Now, I want to address the two main points that for 100T are a major turnoff, right? And what may be for other organizations as well. Why are brands thinking about stepping away? First of all, the price for a spot. I mean, legitimately, we look at the price for the spot, the idea of rebranding. These two things are what are causing organizations to make a major step back. First, are the prices too high for the CDL? I truly believe that they are. I really do. I've been very, very careful with this. I've been a huge believer in Call of Duty Esports, and I would love nothing more to sit here and say I can legitimize that price tag. But I just don't feel like I can at this moment. Like I said, it's a little bit early to even decide whether or not it was worth it because all those things can't be 100% confirmed. But in my eyes, the price tag to just get into the league, I feel is somewhat high. Like I said, I would love to speak on the history of Call of Duty Esports and try and show that, hey, the price is worth it. The price is worth it to get into the first year of the CDL. As a salesman, the pitch on this is potential. The product is being valued at what could be, not what currently is. And when something like that is done, it causes organizations to take a step back. Paying for potential in esports is especially scary. Teams are making what they consider to be a decade-long investment, if not longer than that, when games these days have a lifespan of just a few years. And that's where I see the majority of this price tag coming from. We talk about the year debate, how long titles are existing right now. Call of Duty's, it has the pieces in play. Its life cycle, while I deem it, is by no means perfect. It allows for excitement every year. It always keeps things interesting. It's kind of like that wild card esport that, hey, has you coming back every single year. It's always somewhat enticing, and if it's a matter of somewhat of a depressing state, you can always say, you know what, the next Call of Duty's coming out. What do we have for next year? We're back on boots in the ground. Oh, we got a World War II shooter. We got Black Ops 4 back on boots in the ground. This year, like I said, there's a number of different excitement when it comes down to a title each year. And competitive Call of Duty, right? Its history goes back 12 plus years at this point. It's got legs to it, and while there has been a noticeable decline, it's been slow. It by no means has been instant. It wasn't one day Call of Duty esports fans woke up and said, whoa, where'd the viewership go? It happened over time. Call of Duty, I think, with the right pieces in play, may have the ability to legitimize the price tag and the idea of franchising. I just think it's really going to take the personalities. I think it's going to take the brands and the simplicity of the game into the overall idea of it. It just needs to pretty much get the execution. It has the pieces in play, but how do you use those pieces, especially in the first year, which we know is going to be massive. But even knowing that, the brands are still taking a risk, right? By even knowing the history, by knowing all the pieces that it has in play, this is still a huge risk and involves a lot of cash. Don't get me wrong. It's not just a matter of paying $25 million for a spot and you're through. No, that's not at all the case, right? By no means did the process end here. This is not an all-inclusive deal. You're in charge of making a new brand, which requires a ton of infrastructure. It requires a new team, new positions. You also have to look at possible future events. They're already talking about homestand events. That's going to require a pretty penny as well, a nice price tag. And then with all those costs, you still have to deal with, player contracts. Those are a pretty fun thing to deal with, right? You must have at least 7 players on your team, and the league minimum contract is going to be $50,000 per year, including benefits. Teams per year, just for players, will be paying, and I tell you this now, it will be way more than this, at least $350,000 for contracts, and that will be a team at its minimum. Nobody, I can tell you this right now, nobody will be paying this and expect it to be a contender. I assure you of that. It will be much higher, including all the things that we talked about. And for all the things, like I said, that we have considered, I believe the buy-in is in fact too high, because $25 million is by no means the entire cost, considering Call of Duty's longevity, but also realizing it has been in somewhat of a steady decline for a while, and also considering that these decade-old brands can no longer be under the same name. It makes sense. It's hard to be involved from everyone's perspective. Now, quickly on to the next turnoff for a lot of these brands. It's not just the money, but it's also a big issue with 100 Thieves, the idea of changing up the brands. And I truly have gone back and forth on this. Initially, I was totally against it. Then I started to kind of get a little bit of an idea for how it could be somewhat interesting. It could be somewhat of a decent venture to try to make it into. But the whole aspect of Call of Duty esports has been behind the brand names. And I feel like at certain points, esports tries to take too much away from regular sports. They've said we want a franchise. They're obviously allowing for the money to be somewhat similar in that aspect. Prices are high, new brands, new locations. You're tied to one location. But like I said, this is the worrying thing for me. When are we going to get to the point where esports realizes it's not sports? It really isn't. Like, we obviously are similar in certain aspects, but let's not try to be sports exactly. The idea of limiting yourself in one location when the internet is looked upon as somewhat infinite, you shouldn't be labeled to just one place, right? When you're tied to a city like Dallas, if you're Envy, your fan base isn't all in Dallas. Like I said, there's a decent majority that could be in Dallas, but they're spread out all over the world. We've got into this conversation many times, and I truly believe Call of Duty Esports has a solid opportunity in front of it. I just feel it's a matter of the game at this point. I think that will put a validation on these subjects, and the price, the brand changes, everything. I think in some ways Call of Duty needs to go through some major changes, and is the branding thing one of those? We'll have to see. We really kind of have to see how, once the league is somewhat underway and once things are kind of all beginning to iron out. But one last thing that I want to cover, one last question that people were bringing up about 100 Thieves, and obviously a lot of this conversation spreads from probably what are their thoughts on this, is who needed who more, right? Who needed each other worse? Did 100 Thieves need Call of Duty more, or does Call of Duty need 100 Thieves more? And I will say, in both of their positions at this moment, if I'm 100 Thieves, let's go and take the mindset of them right now, looked upon as one of the best organizations already in the world. We came into Call of Duty regarded as one of the best teams throughout the year. We went back to back. We proved that we are the second most viewed team in all of Call of Duty Esports and what is considered to be our actual first year. They adapted the audience. They instantly made a fan base. And however, they did lose a major title. What are they already doing? They're looking to fill the gap. They're looking to fill the void. They're already talking about entering into Counter-Strike. 100 Thieves is clearly still afloat. They built their foundation, and now they carry on forward and trying to hold on to the Call of Duty fan base, of which they will follow them for the future because of how great of an impact that they've already made. Now, if I'm Call of Duty, right, I just lost one of the biggest brands in the world, and we also are losing a few other ones as well, right? We're losing the optic side of things. The boys in green are no longer going to be under that particular camp. We're also losing 100 Thieves. We could, in some ways, also be losing brands like FaZe and United, who have yet, as of this moment, to announce that they will be in the league as well. Viewership is in question. I lost a brand that could help with that, and like I said, we don't even know what brands are going to be in for next year. Some of the top 3 are still in question. By starting franchising and making new brands, we are hitting the refresh button. Call of Duty and franchising, they are hitting the restart, meaning that they're kind of in some ways in year 1. This is pretty much restarting everything. And so when you're looking at a company's aspect, year 1 is very important, right? It's somewhat of a basic idea. Year 1 is important. 100 Thieves, they got through theirs. Franchising now, they have to deal with it. And they're losing one of those brands that just made it happen. Like I said, both sides, I think, need each other, but in the very delicate space that Call of Duty finds it's in, it's shaky. It's already having somewhat of a narrow takeoff, and I truly believe by having a brand like 100 Thieves, it would allow for that process to go much, much smoother. 100 Thieves already gained a major audience. They've already taken fans from Call of Duty now into their future as well. And like I said, Call of Duty is starting on day 1 with franchising this season, and by no means having the same brands that have built them for the longest time. It's becoming incredibly clear. Call of Duty Esports is making a stand to change in some ways what has kind of built them up to this point. They are no longer preferring the idea of what has kept them alive for so long, brand recognition. It'll be interesting. It'd rather be a very interesting next few months. Will other brands follow along that same path? We'll have to find out. And Call of Duty fans, continue to hold your breath. This offseason only continues to get more and more interesting.